Hi there, how are you doing? This is Jansen from VMO. Welcome back to the VMO YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about rotten bottoms. So if you think that's something that happens after 6 pints and a curry, you could well be right. But today I'm talking about sea fishing rigs and weak link systems. So chances are if you've been out fishing over rough ground, you've got your line snagged up, you've cast out, everything is stuck fast, you pull for a break one way or another and your line snaps. There is a way of going about this so that you could only potentially lose your lead weight. I'm going to be looking at those options now and explaining how to go about creating an effective weak link system. Let's get into it. So before we get into the whys and wherefores and what we've got there, what we can actually use as a weak link system nowadays, I want to talk about safety. So obviously, if you're casting a big lead weight off the shore, this is a 6 ounce, it's quite a hefty lump. You've got to think about a way of casting it safely. So first things first, we're obviously going to be using a shock leader. If we're using a shock leader, we're going to be using something of around 60 or 80 pound, possibly even more, but something that's going to absorb the shock of the cast. If you don't do that, your line could snap and you can lose your lead. That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is that lead goes traveling along the beach and hits someone. And you can imagine the rest. So here we've got, as I say, a 6 ounce lead, and I've just connected this onto a section of 20 pound line. What we're aiming to do is only lose the lead weight when it becomes snagged, which is great. Obviously 20 pound line, I've got a 20 pound main line on my reel, so it's both the same. When the lead gets snagged, this line is going to snap. But first of all, we've got to decide how we're going to safely cast this lead. If we know that we need a 60 or 80 pound shock leader to absorb the cast, how are we going to cast this lead out with this weak line? If we attempted to cast with this weak line, this is what would happen. Snap. Lead goes off down the beach, not good. So what we need is a safe way to carry this lead out to where we're going to be fishing. So here we go, here's our lead. This one happens to be plain, it doesn't really matter. And here is that 20 pound line. But what I've got is a Gemini Breaker. So the Gemini Breaker, fantastic device for holding the lead captive throughout the cast. And if I give you a quick demonstration, on goes the lead onto this folding arm. And then the disc comes down over the folding arm like that and holds it in place. And you'll see now that if I go and apply any pressure to this, that lead's not going anywhere. This means we can safely cast the lead at full power, get it out there, no problem. Upon impact with the water pressure pushes on this disc and releases the lead. So now, once the lead sinks down to the seabed, it can get snagged up if it wants. It doesn't matter, it's a sacrificial lead. Once that's snagged up, if we pull for a break, hopefully it's only going to be this weak link that snaps. But as I've said, the most important aspect here is safety. We need to be able to cast this lead safely. We've got a shock leader on our reel. We've got a strong rig body, so we don't want to compromise that by putting the full power of the cast on this line. So once again, you can see the lead is secured on the Gemini Breaker. Water pressure, on impact with the water, bang, up it comes, lead deploys. So that's one option, and probably the safest of all 3 different types that I'm going to show you today. When you've just started fishing, if your casting's a little bit jerky perhaps, something like this is absolutely perfect. Let's look at the other options now. So setup number 2, this is a really simple arrangement. So I've got my bait clip there at the bottom of the rig where I usually attach the lead, but on here I've got a VMO RBC clip. To the RBC clip is my weak line, straight to the lead. So again, we're not going to cast on that 20 pound line, it's just going to snap. But what we do is place the lead on there, So now we can cast at full power. And this one's a little bit different because as it goes out, comes down into the water, doesn't release on impact with the water, but when the lead gets down to the seabed, off it comes. And you're now fishing on the 20-pound weak line. So very similar principle to the Gemini, but it's not captive. So to start off with, I would recommend the captive system that the Gemini Breaker offers. But once you've been fishing for a little while, you can get away with using this style of clip. And you'll notice that when you're casting, the lead actually pivots on there. There's no reason for the lead to jump off of the clip. You'd have to have a really bad jerky cast for that to happen. It is possible, which is why I say to begin with, you should use something like the Gemini Breaker, something that's captive, something that holds the lead in place. But once you've got the hang of things, move on to something like this, and they are actually a lot cheaper. A pack of 20 of these, just a couple of pound. So certainly something to think about. It's a cheaper alternative. Although saying that, if you've got some Gemini big bait clips, they'll do exactly the same thing. Let's take a look at those. So here we have the Gemini big bait clip, which obviously would usually be fished like this. So you can see your hook would clip into there. Conventional bait clip that would go on the bottom of your rig. But in this instance, we've actually inverted the clip and clipped it straight onto the Gemini Splashdown Solo bait clip. So it's in effect upside down. We've then got the weak link tied onto the eye. There's the lead. And all we're going to do to cast is hook it on there like that. So you can see very similar principle to the RBC clip. A slightly bigger tag, making it a little bit safer again. It would take a very bumpy cast indeed to prematurely eject these leads from these style of clips, but there is the potential for it. So I'll just demonstrate this one now and show you exactly what happens. Lead's flying through the air, down into the water, hits the seabed, and ejects just like that. So another very popular option and a cheap option as well. Certainly cheaper than the Breaker. It's not a captive device, but it is very effective, works really well. But there is one way in particular that you can improve both this clip and the RBC clip, and I'll show you now. So here we have two slightly different designs of lead. One's a Namex, one is an SKM, both very, very good leads. And I hear a lot of people saying that when they're fishing over rough ground, they're going to use any old rubbish. So what they're then doing is they're compromising their casting. If you're using a lead which is banana shaped, where it's been hitting the rocks, looking a bit sorry for itself, it's not going to cast very well. Equally, if it's worn away on the sides, perhaps the grip wires won't hold in the recess so well, you're not going to hold bottom in the tide, you're going to break the lead out, you're going to get snagged up straight away before you even start. But the key difference between these two leads is obviously the eye. So if you're using a captive style rod and bottom clip like the Gemini Breaker, it doesn't really matter so much. But if you're using something like an RBC clip, for example, look how easily that will come off when it hits the seabed compared to that. So the bigger the eye on the lead, the easier it will be for the lead to come off once it hits the seabed. Occasionally, if you're casting into a side wind, the wind will actually blow on the line as it's going out to sea, creating a bow effect, and it will keep the line tight. And with that tightness of the line, it won't eject so easily. So this is why I would highly recommend using a lead of this type with a big eye, because you've got a lot more chance of that coming off when it does touch down on the bottom. When it comes to choosing your weak link line, don't go too light. A lot of people make that mistake, and what will happen is basically every cast you'll be unnecessarily throwing a lead away. Always choose a breaking strain that matches the breaking strain of the line on your reel. So in this instance, 20-pound breaking strain line for the rotten bottom and 20-pound line on the reel. This will ensure that it only snaps when it does get snagged up, and it will still take a bit of pressure to get it going. So that was a Teakle talk on rotten bottom weak link systems. I hope you found it useful. It's a really key part of fishing over rough ground, and it's something you should get your head around. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please do consider subscribing to the channel. I'll put some links in the comments below, and I'll catch you again.